morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever in the world you are. Hope you guys are having a great day. Welcome to the 6th episode of Palmetto Property Talk with Will and
Walker. All righty, let's get started. Will, you excited for today?
I am here. It is Friday. Looking
sir.
forward to the weekend. Guys, we've got a good one for you. It's a little bit different than what we've talked about before. Talking about Homeowner's Playbook, so he gets to talk more than I do.
Oh, fine. Yep.
We're going to talk about refinancing, selling your house, and taking advantage of the equity you have in a home. I liked that. It was a great transition.
I know, it paused and stuttered.
Yes. Just like me when I get nervous. Anyway, so let's get going, man. So, like
on the
I said,
docket today,
we have a couple things to talk about. Refinancing, crazy. HELOCs, home equity lines of credit versus a cash out refinance. Knowing when to sell your house, tips for selling, which is his big thing.
Oh, yeah.
Making the most of the equity that you have. So, you guys, looking forward to this. Walker, before we get into it, I know that we've talked a lot about buying homes, and we've been talking about a lot of first-time home buyer stuff.
Oh yeah.
What do you think is, what do you think is going to be able to help, people who have had a home for maybe 3 to 5 years, with some of the stuff we're talking about today?
So typically, we've been talking a lot about first-time home buyers, like you said, and once you buy the house, it's kind of like you're let loose to the dogs. And so we're just trying to make sure that you're equipped with the best tools as you are on your journey in your first home, that you can make the best decisions with your money, because you may have bought at a 7% interest rate. And then you need to go, okay, rates are starting to come down. Is it worth it at this rate for me to refinance, or should I wait? Like, what's the deal? And then if you're ready to move, let's say that first home, you've outgrown it, you took some advice, you said, all right, I'm willing to compromise on a couple things to get a better deal. All right, now you're having kids and you need more bedrooms, you need a better neighborhood, you need closer proximity to schools. What does that selling process look like? How does it turn into, okay, I'm going to sell and then buy my next home that fits my current needs?
Yeah, I think those are all really good points when it comes to selling. Definitely trying to be a fly on the wall, not talk so much like I always do, and ask some better questions, man. All right. So, fun stuff. I know we all love talking about finances.
Mortgages.
If you're me, you love to. But when you're looking at revisiting your mortgage, either refinancing if you're not trying to sell, or if you, are possibly looking into turning a property into a rental property, it's good to look into some different options to refinance. So, when is it a good time? When is it a good time to refinance? Well, what would you think it is, Walker?
Well, it's probably going to be when the interest rate's lower, when you can refinance into either a lower term, or your financial situation's a little better. Maybe you can put some more money into the home, or maybe you want to get money out for renovations. Maybe you have some credit card debt or another loan that's sort of, that interest rate is eating you away, because let's face it, 15% is a lot worse than 6.
Yeah, more like 21, I think, is like the average credit card. Average. So it's pretty crazy. And even car loans, I mean, I heard somebody tell me about a 20% car loan rate. I was like, that is disgusting. But anyways, 100%. So things to think about if you're looking into refinancing, if you own a home, is the interest rate that I have now better or worse than the current interest rates? If it's better, then maybe take advantage of another program that we're going to talk about in a minute, home equity lines of credit. Or, if I'm trying to consolidate debt, doing a cash out refinance, consolidate the debt under one payment every month and pay it off quicker that way. And then, really, like you said, if the term, if I refinance, I'll just do a quick, not analogy, just explanation, really. If I have a house that was, I purchased it 5 years ago or 3 years ago, So let's say I purchased it 3 years ago and it appreciated, and now my mortgage balance is, $240,000 or $250,000. And when I bought the house, it was $291,000, right? So a $300,000 house is the example. Then, if it didn't even appreciate, and I refinance it at a 30-year term again, my mortgage payment's going to be lower because the loan amount is smaller. Even if my rate is higher, it can possibly be lower since
lower payment,
is a smaller loan amount. So that's some people will do that. From there, consolidating debt like we just talked about, man, I think if I'm underwater with credit card debt or I'm underwater with a car loan and I have a house and I can, get a cash out refinance on my house, then I would do that because your credit score is going to be better if you have less credit utilization on your credit cards. If you keep your credit utilization 30% or lower, that's going to be where your credit score is going to be best. 10% is going to be the best, but 30% is really good compared to a maxed out credit card.
Right.
So I think the big thing I would say is, what do you think are some things that people should consider when they're looking into doing this? What would be a reason to refinance or not to refinance?
Well, one big one I can think not to refinance would be if the interest rate is significantly higher than when you bought your house. Let's say you bought your house back in COVID. You had a 3% rate.
Yep.
May not be the best time right now to refinance because we're at what?
We're in the sixes right now.
Right.
It's going to depend on your credit score, but definitely in the sixes, mid to high sixes.
So interest rates double what it is on your current loan, probably not the best time to refinance. And then other factors to consider are, can you afford to refinance? What's your loan to value ratio? What other factors play in? And that's more of a personalized thing that I think you can really help people in advising them, okay, when is the best time to do this?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, so I think you hit on a good point with rates, but even with that though, Walker, I think when it comes down to it, if you have credit card debt or you have high interest debt, even if your rate is going to be higher on your mortgage compared to what it is now, it's usually worth it because it reduces all of your debt payments each month. So, if that's what I'm trying to do, is put myself in a better position to where I'm not underwater, I'm not paying 10, 11, 12 to 20% on credit cards, and I'm racking up balances, then it still has a net benefit to it. But yeah, man, I think that's really good. I think those are some really good points. So, gonna try and not blast through these, but hit on them kind of briefly. I want you guys to interact with us in the comments, or you can email us. Our emails, I believe, may be below, but we'll definitely be open to questions on these.
And if you want to reach out to both of us, it's info@palmettopropertytalk.com is that email.
There you go. He knows it better than I do. But anyway, so there's some different types of refinance options, right? You have a rate and term refinance. So let's say you bought a house in the past year. So your rate's in the sixes, the high sixes, maybe even 7%, depending on what you got. That is you can do two different options with that. You can do a limited cash out rate term refinance. How that works is I'm covering my closing costs through the refinance, and I don't pay anything out of pocket, but I'm changing my rate and I'm getting a lower rate and paying for my closing costs. Most people tend to do that if they can, because they don't want to have to pay for another closing. Otherwise, you can just do a regular rate term refinance, and that's just either it has to be a lower rate in order for it to be a net tangible benefit for you to be able to take advantage of that. So there's no cash out into your pocket or no consolidation of debt. It's either going to include the closing costs, like I said, or you either pay the closing costs out of pocket yourself. So that's that first one that was on the screen a minute ago. The second is going to be a cash out refinance. So quick scenario on that: if I own a $500,000 house and my mortgage balance is $300,000, I can go up to 80% loan to value, which I will explain a little bit more in a bit. So I can get up to a $400,000 loan, and I can get $100,000 cash out. That's the equity that I've built up through owning the home and paying my mortgage payments, and the appreciation. That's what I'm getting that I can borrow against. And that allows you to leverage it for other uses, for home improvements, debt consolidation that we already talked about, or maybe a big purchase. Those are some options you can utilize this for. Last two things, I already talked about closing costs. A lot of people try to incorporate the closing costs into a refinance so that they're not paying anything out of pocket, especially if you're doing a cash out refinance. People try to do that as much as they can because they're usually strapped for cash, and it's a really good way to take advantage of the equity and not pay anything. Last thing on here is, when would a refinance not be right for you? So Walker, we already talked a little bit about on the last slide, just real quick,
talking about rate and that kind of stuff for not being the best time. But other scenarios where doing that cash out refi might not be the best choice for you is if you're planning on moving or selling soon. It might just, because your mortgage payout is going to be less when you do sell, which, depending on the situation, either you need the cash now or you need it later. But typically, you don't want to pay the extra cost of closing a second time.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, if I was buying a house, or if I owned a house for a couple of years, let's say 3 years, and I said, okay, well, rates have come down. If I'm not planning on either renting that house out and keeping it, why would I refinance the house at a lower rate if I'm planning on selling in the next, 12 to 6 months,
right?
Unless I'm planning on keeping it, then it could be a benefit. Otherwise, if I'm planning on moving away, I'm having to pay off that mortgage, and it could be more, and I'm making more payment. I might be making a higher payment, it's just going to depend. But I would say if you're not planning on moving or selling in the near future, it's a great option. But if you are, try and take advantage of the equity that upon the sale of your house, and not have to borrow against it, because that's not usually very wise, in my opinion.
Alrighty. And then talking about, for people who may have a better rate already, may not want to refinance, what options do they have?
Yeah, so HELOCs, which just stands for Home Equity Lines of Credit. So I actually started at a bank. I'm not going to say the name of the bank, but I used to work at a bank. And my bread and butter was HELOCs. I did them all the time. And I would hear so often, man, I've got, a 3%, 4% mortgage interest rate right now. And we bought this house during COVID, and we don't want to mess around with the primary lien or the primary loan. Right. So then a lot of banks, and including lenders like myself, I have several lenders that do HELOCs. We offer this so it doesn't mess with that interest rate. And what a HELOC is, or home equity line of credit, is it allows you to take advantage of the equity you have in the home, but you're not having anything affect your primary mortgage, right? So if I have equity in my home, and what equity is going to be the mortgage loan balance versus the value of my home. So, quick scenario, I have a $500,000 house, that's what it's worth, and my mortgage balance is $300,000. I have $200,000 worth of equity. That means if I were to sell the house today, I would gain $200,000. That's what equity is, right? And that's going to increase with appreciation. That's going to increase with home improvements. Not always, depending on what you're doing, but it can. And it can improve as you continue to make your mortgage payments each and every month. It's a win-win for a homeowner because they continue to gain that, and that's why real estate is a great investment and has been for centuries. So,
very true.
But the other aspect of this is it's a line of credit. So, what is a line of credit? A line of credit is similar, to a credit card. A credit card's a line of credit, right? And what that means is it's revolving. So, I have this line of credit on my house, and I am borrowing against the equity that I've built up in my home, and I can borrow a certain amount. I'm not charged anything unless I start using, the equity. You can get basically home equity line of credit checks. You can do withdrawals. You can do, you could have an equity line credit card. It's similar to a credit card, but it's a lower interest rate than what a credit card would be. It's usually a interest only for about 10 years. It depends on the bank and the lender that you're working with. It's 10 years usually that you're making interest only payments, and then there's usually at least a 10-year repayment period. So that's when you're making principal and interest payments only, or not only, but together. So if I went in the weeds, please guys let me know. Do you feel like I went in the weeds?
No, that was very wave topic.
Okay, I'm hoping to not speak Chinese to people. And if you are Chinese, good job, because I don't know how to speak it. But
very true.
Very true. Wow, I guess I'm pretty dumb then.
Nah.
So, anyways, like I said, so how it works, once again, just recapping it. I have a first lien, my mortgage. I have a great interest rate. I don't want to mess with it. Okay? Then I take out a home equity line of credit. You have to go through a closing process. It is a real estate transaction, so there are closing costs involved with it. A lot of people will have the closing costs incorporated into the HELOC as an initial draw. A draw is what we were talking about a minute ago, where you borrow the money. So that's when you are closed. You are paying your closing costs to do it, and you're taking advantage of the equity that you're building that's already been built in. You're not paying on it unless you have a balance, just like a credit card. But yeah, so Walker, I feel like I've talked a bit much on that.
No,
so
you're good.
What would you say is the best time to use a HELOC aside from just
like
interest rates?
Yeah. So let's say you have that better interest rate and you still need to consolidate debt. Let's say, you have $10,000 worth of credit card debt, which is a good bit of credit card debt. And you're going, all right, I'm getting killed by this 20% interest credit card debt. So if you have a low interest rate on your mortgage, you don't want to touch it, might be time for a HELOC. Let's say you want to do some home renovations, but you don't know exactly how much it's going to cost. You don't know what's the situation. It may be a good scenario for a home equity line of credit because, all right, you need to have fluid access to the money instead of just a singular draw. And so that flexibility is really what a HELOC gives you.
Yeah, exactly.
And you have to be responsible when using it, which I think you can touch on a good bit because you don't want to max it out. You don't want to use all your equity.
No, 100%. So if you're trying to consolidate debt, it's a great option. If you have, some people will use it if they have big purchases coming up instead of taking a car loan, for instance. If, with used car loan rates being high, new car loans, every interest rate right now on lending is pretty high. But some people will utilize, I hope you get that burp in the microphone. So anyway, they might use a HELOC instead to cover that purchase. So be responsible if you're going to use a HELOC, right? So I've seen a lot of people get underwater with these things. because they'll treat it like it's a piggy bank, right? Like they got all this money, but then, they go through that interest only period and they're not making any principal payments, which is, I would never recommend doing that. They rack up, let's say $100,000 on their equity line. And then, let me also say this about HELOCs. It's interest only, but the rate can adjust. The rate can adjust. So if the prime rate, or what the bank calls the prime rate, which is a industry term for what the bank is charging for interest rates, it's different from a mortgage rate.
Right.
So that can change. So it could be prime plus. So let's say the prime rate is 7% plus, okay, let's say another 75 basis points. So it's 7.75. And then let's say a year from now, interest rates go up again to 8. Then I'm paying 8.75%.
Right.
And it's only, yes, I'm paying interest only for 10 years. But if I'm in the house for 30 years and then, 10 years elapse, and I'm not paying interest only anymore, and I'm paying principal and interest on an extra $100,000, and I don't have the money, then I'm up a creek without a paddle.
Exactly.
So what I always recommended when I worked at a bank doing HELOCs is, even though you're making interest only payments, start to make principal payments as well, because the shorter amount of time you have with a balance on there, the better it's going to be. And just like a credit card, the less utilization you have on it, the better it looks on your credit. So lots of ways to take advantage of it, but just make sure if you want to look into something like this, you have somebody explain it to you in depth.
I think that's a good note to leave on.
Yeah. All right, dude. I am talking all about HELOCs
and refis and everything.
All the fun stuff, dude. But so I would say, Walker, what would you say when it comes to real estate is going to be, a good, is a HELOC or cash out refinance a good investment if you're trying to do home improvements? I know this is not on here, but just, do you think it could be a good investment?
So it really depends. Especially if you're talking about selling short-term versus long-term, especially if you're talking about, all right, are these renovations I want or renovations I'm purely getting to improve the value of the home? Because there are people who get renovations just to go around and sell it.
Yep.
There's a whole segment of investors who that's all they do. They're flippers. They buy old houses, they flip them, and they turn them into something else. And so it's hard to judge whether or not a HELOC or a cash out is the best bet for somebody.
Yep.
Unless you sit down with that person and go, let's dig into your finances. Let's dig into what you're trying to do with this. So HELOC may be good for a businessman or a builder or somebody who's an investor because they have more fluid access to their money. They're more liquid. Whereas a cash out refinance might be the better bet for a homeowner. Somebody who's like, all right, I just want to have a draw. I already have a quote from a contractor. I know what it's going to cost.
Yeah. I think the big thing, like you said, is, it's scenario based. A HELOC is great. It can be pitched as an emergency line of credit. I am not a financial advisor, but I am a Dave Ramsey guy. I would say personally, if you have the money and you have the ability to save money, in order to take advantage of, either an interest rate, because since interest rates are high, you're getting a pretty good return on a lot of savings accounts today.
Oh yeah.
Some of them, money market accounts, some of them are offering up to 4%. So that's something I would recommend. Rather than jumping straight into this, maybe consolidating debt, right? So if I'm going to consolidate debt, and also I want some cash out to hold my hand. Okay, if you're going to do that, great. But you should be wise with those funds. But with a HELOC, with it being interest only, if you aren't wise with it, you can get in a lot of trouble. If you're either one, you can use to get those home improvements done, but just make sure you have a plan. Right?
Exactly.
If you don't have the plan already in place and you're like, okay, I'm going to take $100,000 HELOC out, or I'm going to do cash out refi for $100,000, but you don't even need $100,000, then what's the point? Use what you need, get what you need, not what everything you think you want, right?
That's why I was talking about having a quote in hand.
100%.
100%.
But
dude, having your plan ready.
Good luck. A lot of people aren't. I wish a lot of people would be like that. Man. So, the big thing on this, so the benefit to both of these is the access to your equity. The HELOC is great, right? You can get a HELOC, you have access to the equity when you need it, whereas the cash out refinance, you have to go through the whole mortgage process in order to do that. And it can be a little more expensive. And it takes, like I said, it takes a little bit longer at times. It can be quick. It can be quicker than a HELOC. I would say HELOCs can be as little as 30 days. The refinance, depending on the loan program, if you have a FHA, a VA loan, you can do a streamlined refinance, which could be as little as, 2 weeks. Just depends. Because the FHA and the VA, you can usually get away with not having to get... I'm trying to remember. You don't have to go through certain criteria that you would have to do if you did a purchase, which makes it quicker. But yeah, so it just depends. If you're willing to wait and you want to just have access longer term, a HELOC might make more sense, especially if you're going to be wise with it. But otherwise, if you have a fixed amount that you want or need for a big purchase, then just do the cash out refi, in my opinion.
That's our 2 cents.
Yeah, I'll give you 2 cents. I
got one. You got one. We'll rub them together.
It's worth more like half of a cent now.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I think we've kind of explained which one's better than the other. It's not a black and white situation. There's not going to be one size fit all. It's case by case.
It's not spandex.
It's not spandex.
Oh yeah.
Thank you.
It's not one size fits all.
Not all spandex fits everybody, but that was so dumb. Thank you. But anyway, the big thing is, I would to take away is if you have a house and you have a lower mortgage rate, try and do a HELOC because it is interest only, gives you access to funds for a longer period of time. Even if you don't use it, it's something you have as peace of mind. Whereas doing a cash out refinance, it's great because you're locking in a rate. It's a fixed rate the entire duration of the loan, and you get the exact amount you need. You're not playing guessing games. So yeah, that's kind of that. But now I just want to go through a few examples of both. I think I've kind of hit on it already, but just quickly, if you want to show the screen real quick, I don't care if they can't see your face, but if you guys see right here on these two examples, so for HELOC, let's say your house is worth $500,000, your current mortgage balance is $400,000. You have $100,000 worth of equity. So with most HELOC programs, they'll allow you to borrow up to 90% loan to value. And we already explained what loan to value is. It's what is your current mortgage balance versus your home value. What this actually would be called is combined loan to value because a HELOC is another loan. So you're adding two loans together to get that combined loan to value. So you could do up to a $50,000 line of credit in this scenario, right? So you're not paying, this is the big thing, is you're not paying anything on that HELOC unless you take a draw.
Right.
So it would be, most banks will have it where there's a zero balance until you do a draw. Some of the lenders that I work with, they require an initial draw. So there's different ways to game that game. Whereas with a cash out refinance, similar scenario, but a little bit better on the mortgage balance. So you only have a $300,000 balance on the mortgage, but your house is worth $500,000. So you have $200,000 of equity. I don't know why I didn't fix that, but $200,000 worth of equity. You can go up to 80% loan to value. So you can get out $100,000.
Right.
And it's fixed rate. It's all in one loan. You're not having to play, tic-tac-toe. How much do I owe? So that's the big thing. Just explaining these two. If you guys have questions, if you feel like I didn't explain it well enough, please let me know. But I'd be happy to answer that. But Walker, let's let you talk, man.
I know.
Let's let you talk.
Oh, just for a minute. All right. So, when is it time to sell? Just big overarching points: growing family, empty nest, new job, home maintenance. So that can really vary depending on your situation. If you have a growing family, whether you're newly married or you have a newborn on the way or one that just came in, you might have to have more bedrooms, more square footage. You might want a bigger backyard, various things. You might want to be closer to schools. And so depending on your ever-evolving needs, because we're people, we change. The only thing constant in life is change.
This is true.
That is true.
And taxes and death.
Taxes, death, and change.
There you go.
But if your family's growing, it's probably time to move into a bigger home, especially if the one that you bought initially was smaller. Let's say it was a 2-bedroom or a 1-bedroom, or even a townhouse or a condo, which, depending on the situation, can be the right move for people.
Yeah,
I know that there are people who go, I would never buy a condo, and then there are people who go, all I want is a condo.
Yep.
So it really does depend. But if your family's growing and you need more space, it's often better to go ahead and look into getting that space, because the more time you have to plan and the less reactionary you are, often the smarter with your money that you are.
It's a really good point. I think a lot of people, they'll wait and they're like, okay, we've been married, for 2 years, and my wife's 6 months pregnant. Okay, can you imagine
walking 20 houses when you're 6 months pregnant?
That and then the stress of going through the mortgage process and buying during that time,
when you should be devoting your attention to the person who's about to come into this world.
Yeah, exactly. So like you said, it's super important to think proactively rather than reactionary. I know that us saying this isn't going to be a game changer, but
to people,
most people don't think proactively. So to your point, though, if you're going through a big life change, you could be going through divorce, you could be going through having children, being recently married. You might want to purchase a house, a bigger house. Maybe you own something by yourself before. Right. There's a lot of different things that could change, and make you want to be able to buy another home.
Very true. And, another time when it could be a good time to sell is when you're an empty nester. Your kids have moved out. You have this big old house that you raised your kids in, and you and your wife are newly retired. You're getting your Social Security, you're getting your retirement income, and you're like, maybe it's time to sell the house that I bought for $300,000 that's worth $1 million now.
Yeah, I bought it for $3,000 if they're my grandparents.
Empty nesters are a huge group of people who are selling. They're moving into condos, townhouses, planned communities, things that are easier for them as they age.
Yeah.
That's a big reason to sell. And you may want to have less maintenance. You may not want to have to take care of a lawn. You may want to live on a single level. That's a big one for people. As they age, they don't want to walk up and down stairs every day, fall, break a hip, break a rib. That can be a serious health complication for people.
Yeah.
And so living on a single level is a big draw for a lot of those empty nesters.
Yeah, that's a really good point, man. I think it's all of those things, and then, you don't want to put yourself in a scenario of, okay, I'm depending on my Social Security only. Hopefully that's not where you're at, but I've seen it happen where people will be owe back taxes. You don't want to end up like if you've ever seen Happy Gilmore.
Yeah.
His grandma owes 10 years of back taxes because she had this huge house that appreciated, and she couldn't afford. I mean, that's not real, but at the same time,
True.
it does happen.
It does
where
happen.
people can't afford taxes. So getting something that's, affordable, that's going to be, easy to live in, easy maintenance, all one level, especially as you age, you want to be able to find something that's easy to deal with.
Yes. And another good reason to sell is maybe you have a new job. Maybe, you're moving, whether it's into a new city or here to Charleston, or whether it's a new job and you're moving, your job's on the other side of town. And so now you have an hour commute. Maybe it's a good time to go, okay, let's move a little closer to work so I'm not spending $100 or $200 in gas every month.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And so cutting down that time, maybe you start a new job and you're working from home. That's a big one. People want home offices. People want spare bedrooms to turn into home offices. And so if you can sell your current home that doesn't fit your needs, it's a little too far away from work, or you're limited on the number of bedrooms you have, and you can go into something and be like, all right, I have a home office now. I'm 20 minutes closer to work. That can cut a lot of wasted time out of your day.
Yeah. That's good, man. I think that's a very good point, especially with the rise of remote work. I'd say the big thing is, a lot of people need those home offices. They want that, but it also gives them the ability to really buy wherever they want.
That is very true.
Which is a real benefit, especially in an expensive area like Charleston. You could afford to live in a nice house because you want to move to Goose Creek, Monk's Corner,
right?
Compared to living in Mount Pleasant. So, yeah, 100%, man. And I think we kind of already hit on it too. With home maintenance.
That is true. Home maintenance could be a totally another reason to sell, whether it's there's some issues with the house and you don't necessarily want to deal with them. You don't want to spend the money. The only thing I'll say is expect to get less for your house because it has those issues. There are still people who go, my house is worth $500,000 on paper and it has all these issues and that's why I'm selling it. Why won't you take the $500,000? It's like, listen, if your house needs $100,000 in repair, it's worth $400,000.
Yeah.
Or less.
Exactly. I think it's some people will do that, and I think that's really cutting your legs off out from under yourself. And that's when you would do something, even in that scenario, I would say if it's that drastic of that need of improvement, do something with the equity you have to get the stuff fixed. And then even if you lose some money from selling, from doing that loan, at least you got the house sold for what you wanted it to sell for.
Right. That is also true. And maybe if you have those home maintenance issues and you don't have the cash for it, that's where the refinance, that's where the HELOC steps
exactly.
in.
Yeah. That's the point with that is you can either, if you have a lot of home maintenance issues where, it could cost you, the house sits on the market for 6 months because you have it listed way too expensive, way too much compared to comparables, or you have, maintenance issues. Who's going to buy a house that's, over the list price or over where the market price, the list price is over the market price, and then it needs, $50,000 worth of improvements. Who wants to buy something like that if you're asking a premium price? It's a marketable thing when you're trying to sell. But I mean, it's a very valid reason to move.
It is.
So
another thing we wanted to touch on is prepping your home for sale. Big points, making those essential repairs like we were just talking about. Some tips for decluttering, which a lot of people don't do. The benefits of staging, and then just understanding the selling process. So we were just touching on, those essential repairs, things that are going to, they may cost you a little bit of money, but they're going to improve the selling price of your home. And, what I would say is do what you're comfortable with.
Yep.
Because if you're willing to sell it for a little bit less than market because it needs repairs, then you're technically selling it at market for what the home is. But do what you're comfortable with. The more that you repair and improve, typically the higher it's going to be. Certain things have better return on investment than others, and that's purely just because of cost.
So what would you say are a couple of the essential repairs? Because I was talking to a couple other realtor friends of mine You know, and it could be as small as, you know, painting the front door.
That's very true.
It could be as small as, you know, doing a little bit of landscaping in the front yard to make the house more appealing, for the curb appeal. Or, okay, you have nasty dog smelling carpets. Pay for carpet cleaning. That's crazy.
I know.
People won't do that.
They won't.
It doesn't make any sense.
So I'll tell you this much. There are people who won't clean their cat's litter box before they list their house. Or before showings.
I would never walk in that place.
I know. But people do it all the time. But what I will say, essential repairs, you know, anything that is going to come up in inspection and cause a big tizzy, like foundation or structural issues, those are things you need to get looked at. If you don't want to repair them, you need to get estimates, and you need to provide those estimates. That's my personal opinion. I know other realtors who don't do that. I think they're shady, but that's a personal preference. Other things that are more cosmetic, maybe as simple as lights, paint, flooring, maybe some, you know, just very basic things that improve the look of the house that aren't necessarily essential repairs, but they improve the value. They make it seem like a more premium house.
Okay, I see. So, like, you know, let's say I have, you know, an AC that's starting to crap out on me, right?
True.
That's something, you know, because ACs can cost $10,000 if you have to do a brand new AC. You know, that's something, you know, would you say it's a selling point to be able to say, hey, we have a brand new AC unit?
It is a selling point. It is a very common selling point too. You know, you'll see all the time, you know, people in the MLS marketing, AC was replaced in 2023. AC was replaced in 2019. Brand new AC unit, brand new ducts, brand new plumbing. People talk about the recent repairs they've made. Sometimes, depending on the buyer, certain buyers are more receptive to that. Certain ones are a little less receptive because they don't know the true cost behind those things.
Maybe not for a first-time home buyer.
That's very
right?
true.
Maybe somebody who's, you know, a little more experienced. Maybe this is their second or third home. Sure. Not they own 3 homes, but second or third time buying a house.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, boomers will have 3 and 4 homes. I'm kidding.
Yeah.
Plenty of people out there.
Boomers. No. Though other than that, I am curious. What do you think decluttering looks like for a listing?
Well, I would say I think it's simple things, you know. Instead of leaving dishes in the sink before you have a showing,
right?
You know, just be a good human being and do your dishes and put them in the dishwasher. It's not hard.
Make your bed.
Make your bed. You know, if you have kids, make sure the toys are away and simple things like that. I mean, you don't want your house to look like. I mean, you want it to look lived in, but you don't want to show. It's just like anything. It's a first impression.
That's very true.
If I show up on a date with a girl and it's a blind date, am I going to show up wearing sweatpants and a hoodie?
No.
Or am I going to wear something nice? Right.
Exactly.
So it's the same idea when it comes to that. When it comes to decluttering, you want to show your best self.
That is very true. But also some other tips that are sort of maybe a little less obvious and a little more thinking in the buyer's shoes. You know, when you're decluttering, take away as much of the personal items as you can stand. Box them up, get them in storage or wherever you're going to put them. You know, getting rid of those personal artifacts often and leaving space for the house to feel like, okay, I can put my stuff in here. Because what you'll see a lot of is people who absolutely have every piece of storage in their house maxed out. And it's like, the buyer sees that and they go, there's no storage here. Even though there obviously is, because there's no extra storage.
Because they can't see it.
They can't see it. So, you know, the type of thought process that a buyer goes through is not necessarily, how does this house look like when it's lived in? It's, how would my stuff look in here? And if they don't see the extra space to put their stuff, they often think it's not there, even if it's just filled with your stuff. And so decluttering, getting rid of personal items, leaving space in the house really does help. That's why vacant houses sell faster, to be honest.
Yeah, because people can see a full scope of where things
where
I can go with things. That makes sense, man.
And then talking on staging, which is another thing about vacant houses. Often, staging with your own furniture, pretty much completely free, right? But oftentimes, professional staging can help, a house sell for more. I think what I have on here is that 75% of sellers saw a 5 to 15% ROI, return on investment, above ask or over their ask when it comes to staging. And that was the Real Estate Staging Association. That's the number that they put through. And, staging can have a huge benefit on a house, especially if it's vacant. But if you have your own furniture and it looks good, sometimes you can just get away without it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think from what I'm understanding at the end of the day, like I said a minute ago, is putting the best picture out there of what the house looks like. So it's just like going on a date or a first impression for a job interview. You're showing what this house could look like if you lived in it.
Very true.
And it was here's my best foot forward so you can see where your things would go, how it looks if you made your bed and you have this nice furniture in there.
Very true.
Yeah, I think that's really good, man.
And then another thing that I think we want to touch on when prepping is just understanding the selling process. Let's say this is the first home that you've ever sold. Let's say this was your first home you ever bought, and now you're going to sell it to move into a new home, whether it's because any of the reasons we talked about previously, maybe you're moving to a new area, whatever it is. Understanding that selling process, selling is so different from buying. Even though you think, it's a real estate transaction, it's the exact same thing. I'm just going to call up the realtor, they'll have it done. It's a totally different process. There's a lot more build up to selling than there is to buying. Buying is there's a short build up window and then a long cool down in terms of you have a short amount of time where you're getting pre-approved, looking at houses, offer. And then you have this crunch time afterwards, after everything's been done. And that's your time to put in your work. Selling, complete opposite. There's a huge buildup. It is getting all your ducks in a row before you list it. And then by the time you list it, you're marketing that house like crazy. You're doing showings, you're doing open houses. There's a lot of upfront work. And then once that offer comes in, you kind of chill out, you relax, you let the buyer do their work. And then you have a little bit of stuff right before close in terms of signing disclosures and payouts and all that. But generally, there's a lot more build up to the selling process. And then there's a lot more that happens after the offer in the buying process. So they're totally different. And, my advice would always just be to consult with your realtor, consult with your financial advisor, your accountant, whoever you use. Get advice. Because often, if this is your first time selling, you don't know what you're doing. 100%. Even if it's your third time selling, often things change so fast that it's like, I need somebody to guide me through it. And so I would advise selling with a realtor purely because the average return on investment when selling with a realtor is like 25% higher than a for sale by owner.
Yeah, I remember when I started in mortgages, I was calling, we call them FSBOs, yeah, which is for sale by owner. And, what I saw on my end is that a good half, it seemed like, would be on the market for 6+ months. Not only that, but another half would just take the listing off because it didn't sell. So having a realtor who knows what they're doing and helps you prepare, instead of saying, I know what I've got. Okay, you're just like the guy on Facebook Marketplace trying to sell a 2001 Toyota Tacoma for $15,000. You're wrong. You do have a 2001 Tacoma,
right?
But it's not worth $15,000.
Exactly.
So yeah, 100%.
So, just in general, some smart equity moves, things that help you maximize your purchase, maximize your investment, because for a lot of people, their house is like half of their retirement once they move out of it. And so big points to touch on. Want to touch on regularly assessing your home's value. Go a little more in depth on what this loan to value ratio means, and then financially planning around your home.
Yeah.
And then, like I said earlier, consulting with your financial and real estate professionals that you trust.
Yeah. I think that's good. I think this is a good slide for us to both be able to share, our insights, as well as bounce ideas off of one another.
One thing I will say, regularly assessing your home's value.
Mm-hmm.
I have some opinions on that. I know you do as well.
Mm-hmm.
What I would say is, as a realtor, I do yearly market updates for everybody who's bought a home, sold a home, is interested about selling a home, whether it's for the area that they own a home in, or whether it's for the areas that they're interested in. Because keeping that market, even if it's just in the back of your mind, is a huge game changer for people, because they're not surprised whenever it's finally time for them to make a move, sell, buy, whatever it is. They can be upfront and be like, hey, you've been helping me keep in touch with what the market's been doing over the past couple of years. I'm not surprised that my home only appreciated by 1% every year versus 5%. Yeah. I'm not surprised when I go, oh my gosh, prices are at what now?
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's a really important thing when it comes to doing this. Having a realtor who does this regularly, at least once a year, is good, because it gives you, instead of sticker shock of, man, I thought my house was worth X, right, and then you get a kick in the pants of, wow, my house has only appreciated 2% over the past 2 years, 3 years. You have an understanding of where things are at, rather than living in la la land, expecting your house to be worth $1 million
in a year, which is But home improvements are another big thing when it comes to your home's value. If you are slowly putting in what we like to call sweat equity, it can improve the value of the home. That means like doing things yourself, not necessarily like saying that DIY is the best. But
I would say it depends on what you're doing.
It depends on what you're doing. If you're making cardboard cutouts look like your sink, no, you don't want a cardboard sink. But if you're doing things like putting in a floor, granted, flooring contractors do a really nice job of it, but as someone who grew up doing all this kind of stuff, my father's a contractor, I can put in a floor in a week.
Yeah.
And I can have a couple buddies over. We can put in a floor, and it's nice. And so that can really improve the value of a home, especially if you have shag carpet from the 70s.
Yeah. Even the small things. If you put the work in, it's called sweat equity for a reason. You're doing the work, right? So if I own a home for a couple of years, and I'm able to change out shag carpets, and I'm putting either new carpets, or I'm putting luxury vinyl plank in there myself, which honestly is not very hard. If you watch a couple of YouTube videos, instead of being don't be too proud to watch YouTube and try and figure things out. But that's something you could do for relatively cheap.
Very true. In comparison to getting a contractor to do it.
Yeah, that's 100%. And throwing some paint on the walls if you hate the color of the house. Different rooms in the house, and they're not crazy eccentric colors. That can add value to a home, and it's not a super time intensive thing.
It is not.
It can be expensive, but usually not as expensive as hiring a painter.
That's very true.
So those small things over time can build equity, because it makes the house more appealing. So, yeah, man. That's my thoughts on home improvements, I guess.
Oh yeah,
that you can do on your own. But that kind of brings us into the next point of loan to value. So, like I think I've hit on this a lot in this episode, but loan to value helps you determine what the equity of your home is, or how much you would get if you sold your home, right? So if your mortgage balance is $300,000 and your house is worth $500,000, if all things were great and if you had somebody give you an offer for $500,000, before any other deductions and paying anyone, you would net $200,000 from selling your home.
Right.
So, figuring that out is something to, determine if I am in a good spot. Is it a good time to buy or a good time to sell? Because if I only am going to gain, $5,000-$6,000,
may not be the best.
Unless you're going through a divorce, which, I'm sorry if you are. But that doesn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, it does not.
No. So from there, also with this loan to value, it's important to know because it gives you an idea of what you might be able to qualify for. Okay, can I qualify for a cash out refinance? Can I qualify for a home equity line of credit? Am I doing a rate term refinance? These things are important because, it can give you access to equity. It can give you access to a lower rate. It just depends on where you're at with the value of your home. But, with any of these equity leveraging loans, you need to have some equity in the home. The home needs to have appreciated or you've
paid down the balance of your previous loan.
Exactly.
And, accessing that equity, I think, is very important when it comes to having a financial plan for it. Because if you don't have a plan for it, you're going to snowball yourself. You have to have a plan. And so financially planning around your home, whether it's regular maintenance or having a rainy day fund in case the AC broke down and now I have to replace a $10,000 unit.
Yeah.
Having that rainy day fund, that emergency fund, I think is a huge benefit to people. And financially planning around those equity utilizing loans, and how would you say that planning, when it comes to planning to live long-term in a home, how does that affect your view on what's your best option?
Yeah. So the big thing is that I would recommend is if I'm planning on living in a home long-term, if I have a lot of debt, and I'm just trying to pay off debt and live the Dave Ramsey way, then I would do a cash out refinance. Because if I'm living in a home and I've lived in a home, let's say for 10 years and I've built up a lot of equity, it's going to make more sense unless I have, a crazy low interest rate to do the cash out refi, because it's just like using a personal loan or a debt consolidation loan in order to pay off debt quickly and have it as one payment, and sometimes at a lower interest rate when it comes to those personal loans. But this is even better because it's fixed. It's a longer period of time. So it's a good thing. But there's definitely another camp that would say a home equity line of credit is better because, it's interest only. If I don't need it, if I don't use it, I'm not paying anything, right? So that's the benefit of it. I would say, the first scenario, I have debt, I need to consolidate, do the home equity or do the home improvement loan if I have a lot of equity. Otherwise, if I don't have a lot of debt or I want to have a rainy day fund, not really a fund, but an emergency line of credit, then I can use that home equity line of credit whenever I need it. So it's just like what we talked about. It's case by case.
Very good.
But I would say, if what I'm trying to accomplish is consolidating debt, utilize cash out refi if you have the equity in the home. If you want to just be able to afford regular maintenance, okay, do a HELOC. That's something that I would do. Just have a small HELOC on your house and you're not touching your interest rate. But I think the other thing too, though, Walker, is that should be talked about is, okay, if you're planning on living in that home for a long period of time, have you thought about investment properties? Have you thought about expanding into other avenues of real estate instead of pigeonholing yourself and saying, okay, I'm going to live in this house. I'm going to depend on my Roth IRA to cover everything. Okay, real estate appreciates pretty regularly and not making more land. And if you can get some investment properties under your belt and then be able to sell them off eventually, that's going to probably be a better return on your investment.
That's very true. And I think we're planning on doing a investors workshop here in a couple months. that we're going to do. And I think we're going to probably put out a couple episodes on investing.
Yeah. I think that's going to be good. I hope you guys like that kind of stuff because, I know there's a lot of trends, talking about the, fix and flip and, house hacking and all of these other options when it comes to real estate. And, you don't want to pigeonhole yourself if you can, in one home forever, unless, if it's your dream home, not saying you can't live there forever, but there's a lot of different ways
there's a lot of ways to skin the cat.
Yeah.
And one more thing, I know I touched on it previously, but consulting with financial and real estate professionals, I think gives you a leg up on people, because the more expert advice you can get, often the more educated you are, the more informed you are, the better financial decisions you can make. So whether that's, speaking with me or speaking with Will or speaking with your accountant or your tax attorney or your tax specialist, whatever it is that helps you get in the best financial situation possible, even though it may cost you a little bit of money, often can get you a better return on investment. And I have a stat here from Clever Real Estate that says that homes sold with a realtor earned owners on average $79,000 more. So that's based off the average U.S. home, which I think is about 400,000, somewhere in that ballpark. I don't know right off the top of my head what the national average is, but that's a significant chunk of change.
Yeah,
it more than covers commission. More than covers commission.
Yeah, I think the big thing when it comes to this, guys, is, taking advantage of a real estate professional, talking to a financial advisor that you have, talking to tax professionals, having some forward thinking when it comes to selling puts you in a better spot instead of, having your house put out there and then somebody puts you an offer in and you basically get screwed because you didn't talk to anyone and you think, I know what I'm doing. I've owned a house for 30 years. Okay, you've owned a house. You've never worked in real estate, unless you have your real estate license and you're selling your own house. That's entirely different.
That's an entirely different ballgame.
A lot of people who do these for sale by owner listings, they have no idea what they're doing. Literally none. So it's not an aside to them, but there's resources out there. So why not put yourself in a better position instead of thinking you know everything? That just shows pride. And, not saying that you couldn't know something, but, try and, cut your losses sometimes.
Yeah. If you're going to spend $10,000 or $20,000 in commission, it makes sense to get the $79,000 extra.
I mean, you're covering your commission. For your realtor. You're getting more return on investment overall. They might be able to say, hey, you are listing what you're saying you want the list price to be is too much. They're going to be brutally honest with you. They're going to say, hey, paint the front door, make sure your house is clean, because these other thing that for sale by owner listings don't do. They don't know about that. They don't know they should keep their house clean. They don't know that their house looks like crap.
Some of these and it's like, oh my Lord.
So, end of the day, make sure you understand that, we're not here just to do a sale. We're not here just to do a transaction. We're here to help you. We want you to be able to get the best offer when it comes to selling your house. I'm not a realtor, but I'm here to help in any capacity I can. Right. If it comes to getting the money to do a home improvement, I'm here to help. And I know Walker's got a heart to help people too. So,
well, thank you. I think we're going to close out with our good old Bible verse.
Yeah, man.
1 John 1:3.
You want to read it?
Oh, yeah. That which we have seen and heard, we proclaim also to you, so that you may have fellowship with us. And indeed, our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ.
All right, guys. Well, we hope you guys were able to get some benefit out of this. Once again, this is Palmetto Property Talk. My name is Will Todd.
I'm Walker Ballou.
And I'm a mortgage loan officer licensed in South Carolina and Georgia. And Walker is
a realtor here in Charleston, South Carolina, licensed all the way across South Carolina, but I specialize here in the Tri-County area. if you would, we'll have our phone numbers down here. We'll have a QR code to our website here in the middle, and then info@Palmetto Property Talk that reaches out to both of us. And if you want our individual emails, those are on the website.
Yeah, but make sure you like and subscribe. If you have questions, make sure to comment below, guys. All right. Have a great day.